Salve omnes. Welcome to the screencast for Caesar's de Bello Gallico, Book 1, Chapter 7. This is going to be the last Caesar reading from Book 1 that we do in Latin. In this one, Caesar himself finally arrives. He's been laying out the situation with Helvetian immigration from their territory, possibly through Roman territory. And once he gets word of this, we see Caesar leap into action, as is his manner. So let's get going. Caesari cum id nuntiantem esset eos per provinciam nostrum iter facere conari maturat ab orbe proficisci. All right, so one little quirk, of course, is that Caesar always speaks about himself in the third person when he's talking about the general Caesar. And the only time he ever refers to himself in the first person is when he's speaking essentially just as the narrator. If he says, like, as I mentioned before, that's the narrator Caesar, but then when he's talking about the military man out in the field doing stuff, Caesar refers to Caesar as Caesar. All right, so when this had been announced to Caesar, that, indirect statement, that they, the Helvetians, Conari, were trying to make a journey, iter facere, through our province. He maturat, he hastened to set out from the city. And I say hastened in the past tense, even though this is a present. I'm using historical present tense, which we'll do as a past in English. And just be consistent. You can do either one, but just make sure that once you pick one, stick with it. So he hurried to set out from the city, and he hurried into further Gaul by the greatest marches possible. So by the greatest possible routes, the longest he could cover in a day, and he reached Genoa. As your note in the book points out, according to Plutarch, this was an 8-day journey, which means that Caesar, coming from Rome, was covering about 90 miles a day. So in the ancient world, that is moving. Provinciae toti quam maximum potes militum numerum imperat. So he orders as great a number of soldiers as possible for from the whole province. And even though that's the dative there, provinciae toti, probably to be taken as a dative of separation. So probably from the whole province rather than for the whole province. So he ordered as great a number of soldiers as possible from the whole province. In all, there was a single legion in further Gaul, right? And so he's got to call them in from Provincia, right? So next door in Roman territory, because there's only one legion there to stop these guys. And he orders the bridge, which was at Genoa, to be chopped down. So they thought, oh, we'll just cross the bridge. And he's like, oh, no, you won't. Let's see. So when the Helvetii were informed about his arrival. So a little note, so certior facere, so to make someone more certain, is an idiom that we're going to translate as inform. So certiores facti sunt means they were informed. Literally, they were made more certain, but really that means they were informed. So when the Helvetians were informed about his arrival, they sent ambassadors to him, legates to him, the most noble of the state, of which delegation, of which embassy, Nemeus and Verocloetius held the chief spot. So these two guys are nominated to lead the delegation. They are among the noblest of the Helvetii. Qui dicerent. So notice here, dicere plus nt gives you imperfect subjunctive. And what's going on here is probably a relative clause of purpose. So this delegation was sent to say, so you could replace the qui with an ut. So they were sent to say that, indirect statement, sibi esse in animo, there was to them in mind. And so there was to them is bad English. We would never say that. So what that's really saying is that they had in mind, right? There was to them in mind means they had in mind to facere iter, make a journey through the province, sine ullo maleficia, without any mischief, propter quote, because they had no other route. Um, right, so we just want to pass through. We're not staying. We're not making mischief. The other route is terrible, so no mischief, no maleficium. Just please let us go. And they were sent there to say that Rogare, they were asking that it be allowed for them, Fakaraid, to do this eis voluntate, with his permission, with his consent, right, according to Caesar's will. So they kind of started doing it without asking. Now that they know that he's showing up, their delegation is asking that, please, can we do it? Caesar, non putabat concedentem is kind of the meat of it there. So Caesar was not thinking that it ought to be allowed to them because, quote, he was holding in memory, right? He was mindful of the fact that Lucius Cassius the consul had been killed, and these essays in red in the parentheses I've supplied for you, since in Latin it's understood, but Caesar doesn't actually write these. He doesn't really need to write these, but after this Memoriae Tenebat, he was remembering that. You've got an indirect statement, so these PPPs, the occisum, the pulsum, and the mesum, are really perfect passive infinitives. One note about that as well, if you remember your grammar, you've got a past tense verb in your verb of the head construction, right? He was remembering. And then you've got a past tense infinitive. And when that happens, you need to make sure that the phrases in the infinitive you're rendering as had, because they happened before something already in the past. And the way that English expresses that is with the pluperfect. So because he was remembering that Lucius Cassius the consul had been killed, and Exercitum Eius, his army, Pulsum, had been pushed back or defeated by the Helvetii, and had been misum subjugum, sent under the yoke. And I've given you a little picture here of an army being sent under the yoke. What that means is a defeated army might be subjected to further humiliation by taking 3 spears and lashing them together in such a way that to pass under it required you to bend over in an act of submission. And so the entire defeated army would be sent kind of in parade through this, having to lower their heads and show their submission. The Romans did this to other people because it was humiliating, and then, in turn, for it to happen to a Roman army was very humiliating for them. And remembering the Helvetii had been part of this is making him think, you know what? Yeah, they killed the consul. We know from elsewhere that his own father-in-law had been killed in this conflict, so he has no love for the Helvetii. So he's thinking, nope, not going to yield to their request. Neque homines inimico animo date facultate per provinciam itineris faciundi temperatures abeniuri et maleficio existimabat. All right, so that homines from right there could be nominative, could be accusative. Can't really decide yet until you get to your verb existimabat singular. That means that's got to be the direct object, not the subject. So nor was he thinking, and so it's still Caesar, nor was he thinking that men with hostile intent, with enemy mind or hostile intent, and then all of this in abab, with an opportunity given of making a journey through the province. So they're the gerundive because it's modifying itineris. So with an opportunity of making a journey through the province having been given, he was not thinking that they could hold themselves back, temperaturos, from injury and mischief, right? So if you let them in and say it's okay to pass through, you kind of deserve what you get when they run wild. Tamen, nevertheless, in order that a span of time be able to pass, to intercede, while the soldiers gather whom he had ordered, he responded to the ambassadors that he was going to take up a day, some turum diem, to deliberate, right? That he was going to choose a day for him to deliberate. So this sumpturum, the future active participle, but again with an esse understood. So he responded to the ambassadors that he would set aside a day to deliberate. Si quid velint, if they wanted anything, they should return on the Ides of April. So just a little reminder about the quid there, right after si, nisi, num, and ne, all the allies go away. So si quid is really si aliquid. So that's not the quid what, but that's the quid anything. So if they wanted anything, they should return on the Ides of April. All right, so that's it. 1.7, you've now got your screencast for 1.1 all the way through 1.7. Good luck in your studying and your review.